having a common tool that all team members could access and get to the same version of the document with proper configuration management control was important, so that we were all literally on the same page. Carefully selecting what that tool is helpful. The one we used at times was slow, so we had to schedule appropriate time to be able to access documents when we needed them, but it did provide proper security, and thinking in terms of some of the SPU type documentation that we had to discuss with our avionics interface.
ARES 1X used Windchill as our primary data source for storing data, as well as working through our boards and reviews. At the beginning of the project, it was extremely clunky and slow, mainly because, one, we were using it in a way that it hadn't been designed to. We actually overfilled the Windchill environment, which even made the problem worse because it slowed down, people got timeout errors, and they had trouble even accessing documents at various times. We did learn over the course of the project, though, a few real key valuable tools, and Windchill is functioning for us now in our data area, where, one, we've got segmented projects where we don't have them overloaded anymore. We also have the number of users and the access limited to those that need it, instead of having everybody access to everything, because that also puts a lot of overhead on it where we were filling the buffers. We also used it for a review process of our drawings. That was very successful in using in that limited area, capturing the reviews, and then putting out the integrated drawings with including those inputs for the review. So all that worked very well. So we're using the tool now in a more efficient manner that would have helped us at the beginning had we had some good training and understanding of the tool. But we started out using the tool because as a directive. So we had no training or anything up front.
For configuration management, it's very important to have all the documentation in a single tool in a single repository, such as Windchill that we used for ARES 1X. Now, each of the centers also may have their own requirements for using another tool, which at Langley we did. To restrict them from doing that for a project, I don't know if that is necessary, as long as you've got competent and capable configuration managers, such as we certainly did, to be able to duplicate that. I know it's not ideal to have duplicate documentation, but they did a great job, and things were maintained as required and as needed for this project.
One lesson that we really ran into at the end is we allowed a lot of our IPTs, which was our individual our product teams, to develop some of their tools and store them outside of the Windchill environment, which was the final tool that we needed everything in. So at the end, there was a lot of cleanup activity that we're still running through to get it all back into the authoritative tool. It would have been a lot better for the program and easier access all the way along had we all been working in one tool. And the one tool we happened to use at the end, and we'd been required to, was the Windchill environment. The Windchill environment works well, and one thing we learned on that is instead of having one major project, it's better if you have a lot of little projects and link them together, because we actually were the first to actually hit the threshold for the Windchill environment where it starts slowing us down. And that's mainly because we were way ahead of the mainline program. We were doing drawings, we were developing hardware, so our data, we were developing a lot more data a lot faster. So we sort of overfilled all the buffers. So that was something we learned, that breaking it apart, and the mainline has done that, but at front, everybody was trying to keep it in one project. We found the limits of that. So those are two key things, is not having everything in one Windchill environment, having it in segregated, but then linking them to the main. And then the other was, one, keeping all the IPTs in one particular tool from the start of the program, so that way you don't have a lot of closeout activities. Our CM process we did manually in Windchill. So we really, huge amount of effort was put, man hours, time, and everything. I really think there should be a tool that makes that more automated, because one, we were very much one deep on our team, and two, it was so manual. There's got to be a way to there's got to be programs and all. We just didn't have time to go look for them. So that CM function needs to be a automated process versus a manual process.
Yeah, another lesson that I think was key was in 1X, we were asked by Constellation to go ahead and try to come up with a method to do paperless processing of the hardware. That means not just I typed it in on computer, I printed it out, handed it to someone else, and he went and hard stamped it. That means I never used a piece of paper for the entire flow. It was all electronic. Now in Shuttle, we use some paperless processing on the ground side. We have a product called Maximo. That's for all of our facility maintenance type items. And so those folks have been using paperless environments for 8 to 10 years. In Shuttle, we had never done that on the flight side. So this was all new, and it was a big challenge. So we had to go through and make sure all of our business processes could accommodate this new tool. We said, going in, we're going to use commercial off-the-shelf product. We're not going to modify it, because anytime you modify a commercial off-the-shelf product, you can do it, but there's going to be a cost. So we said, we're not going to change that at all. We're going to change our business processes. So we modeled our business processes to meet the tool. And we ended up launching the vehicle successfully at the end of October. And we never used one piece of paper to do any work instructions on the floor at KSC. At the other sites, they had whatever their heritage systems used in order to assemble the various pieces before it got to KSC. But once it got here, all of our processing was done electronically. The engineers authored the work instructions. They sent them out for approvals. The technicians, quality personnel, executed those work instructions and bought off all the buys electronically. There was not one physical piece of paper we used for 1X. And to me, that was a huge success story. And the lesson is that, you can do this even with a complex system. It's not like Shuttle, but, in terms of business processes, it was no simpler, really, than Shuttle. We still had to have USA, NASA, and the contractors review the paperwork. And we did that. We did that successfully. So, and in my mind, when we got down to really that last day when we had a lightning strike, it was the night before launch, we came in and we had to go through and we had to basically do a lot of retests in order to get flight rationale. We were able to do that really because of Solumina, because we were able to make real-time changes to the procedure. Everybody could see what was worked, what the values were, input, and so we could really realize we've done all the testing we needed to do. We satisfied all the requirements that we needed to meet in order to give flight rationale to the launch authority team that day. So the lesson to me is that you can use paperless processing to process flight hardware, and you can do it successfully. And the benefit, an overall benefit, is that it's quicker to do changes to procedure. It's quicker to close out those procedures, and process control of the procedure you're working is actually better, because the tools that are out there, various tools, allow you to basically put in limits that nobody can go beyond. So if you are processing a piece of hardware and you violate a requirement, it will not physically let you move out of that procedure.
We tried to leverage heritage tools just as much as we can, and two of the ones that we borrowed from Shuttle was our Change Management Express tool and our Action Management Express tool, and these worked out very well, especially in the later months of the mission when we had a lot of changes, a lot of actions coming through. And what these management tools allowed us to do is leverage the email system as a change came in or an action came in to get that distributed out to the folks who needed to review it, get their comments in, get those comments addressed, incorporated, and be ready for the board where we needed to go implement those changes. So those worked out very well, leveraging those heritage systems. So we've passed that on to our long-term to look for those type of systems, make sure they're available for the long-term program. One of the areas that we also leveraged was in one of our financial management tools, And this tool was based out of our contractor and was really built for a quarterly reporting period. With ARES 1X, things were happening fast and furious, and we really needed something that reported out at the monthly or even the weekly level. One thing we didn't realize in leveraging that, though, is using a reporting tool that's based on a quarterly. We were trying to cut that a little closer. We could make some decisions in between the quarters, and we realized that it really wasn't built for that. That some of the estimates that were coming in before were either low or high. So our recommendation, our lessons learned to long term, if you're using a tool like that and you use it differently than how it was applied, in this case quarterly versus monthly or weekly, you have to look very close to make sure you're not making erroneous assumptions in there on the data in between the reporting periods.
Another lesson learned on ARES 1X at ground operations was the introduction of an enterprise-level tool. One thing that we realized was a challenge was introducing an electronic paperless integrated work control system for the project. One thing that the project and the program needs to assess prior to adopting that for the first time is, do you want to accept higher risk when implementing a new enterprise-level tool for the first time? Because what comes with the first use of that tool is also the associated learning curve with that tool. The second piece to the enterprise solution implementation is really understanding, do all the pieces of the integrated work control system talk to one another? Do you have functionality? Is there a proper flow of data from one system to the other? Are the interfaces clearly understood, and is it delivering the products that it's supposed to deliver? That is one thing that definitely needs to be considered when implementing a new system for the first time. The third piece of the enterprise solution implementation is that you really need to plan for the training. Failure to have the appropriate level of training and planning for that training up front, it's going to allow you to realize the impacts of that real time. You've got to allow for not only your team to become intimately familiar with the solution that you're implementing, but also those that you expect to interface with and utilize that system at other locations as well. The experience that we had on ARES 1X was definitely a challenge because there was a learning curve associated with implementing that tool, and it definitely took some time for folks to come up to speed. Once they understood the tool, once they understood the nuances of the system, it was implementable, but it wasn't without understanding the learning curve and having the appropriate level of training up front that allowed for that to be successful.